I'm Rachel Patterson, and I am a 28-year-old woman who was raised in Hawaii and California, and I went to school in upstate New York. I lived in Hawaii from about the time I was 5, which is around 1990, to when I left for undergraduate, which would be when I was 17, so I was in 2002.
Okay. So you spent quite a bit of time there.
Quite a bit of time there, 12 years, and I still consider it my home. I spent summers in California with my biological mother, but I spent the majority of my time in Hawaii.
Okay.
I'm a little ashamed of some of the reasons that I wanted to go to New York. It wasn't in the city, it was upstate, but I was really wanting to be around people who I felt were maybe more similar to me. They looked more similar, maybe. They valued things that were more similar, and it was kind of a knee-jerk and wounded reaction, I think, to some of the experiences I had growing up. And I was relieved to be around people who looked more like me.
Mm-hmm. So people who were more racially similar?
Yeah, people who were more white. And I feel embarrassed about it now because I realize that having the ability to sort of escape the discomfort of being different is very much a function of my skin color, very much a function of me being white in America. Mm-hmm. I guess I feel embarrassed that I had the option and that I took it when so many other people don't really get the chance to be finished feeling that way, I guess. Or yeah, we had to take these, they were called SATs growing up, and I don't know how different Hawaii is from a lot of the other states, but it was like the Stanford Achievement Test. It was, a standardized test. There was like listening, reading, comprehension, math skills. It's basic stuff. And I can remember that there were questions that, talked about like autumn leaves, and they made these references to seasons, and I was obsessed with Mary Poppins, the movie, as a kid, and lots of knee socks and dreary London weather and stuff. And I know it's not America, but it was also really not the West Coast, and it wasn't certainly tropical Hawaii either. And so I was just like, what would it be like? What is that like? And we had pen pals from Ohio, and they would talk about like how tall the snow was in feet, and I was just like, I don't even think I've ever seen it snow. And I had no idea. I felt like I was lacking a lot of access. Apples tasted awful in Hawaii because they had to be carted in, and we were really rural, and so we had to drive like an hour and a half to get produce that wasn't grown locally, and so there was just, I don't know. We didn't, in Hawaii, have a lot of, I was really a consumer when I was little. I'd go to California and I would like just love to shop at Walmart. I would just go in and like breathe in the like mass-produced goods, so that I really wanted a more like prepackaged, like standardized American experience. I wanted more homogeneity, I think, somehow. I've done some thinking about, why it was that was so important to me. And I think it was because I associate the lack of that with some of the sadness or discomfort that came with my experience, but I think I was conflating things that weren't necessarily related. But there was like a sense of wanting the kind of experience that somebody who looked like me would have. Somebody who was blonde and white. What kind of experience did media tell me, did my other family members tell me, did my pen pals tell me that I would have? And trying to find that because it seemed somehow better, I guess. I kept thinking that there was like a deprivation going on, that like maybe I would have had an easier time. Maybe I would have felt like I belonged a little bit more. Let's see. Maybe things would have just been a little easier. Like it would have been a little bit easier for me to be even on the academic path that I was on, or having some of the interests that I had that seemed fairly standard based on my consumption of media, but didn't have a lot of support in my particular school. Some of it's just vain stuff, like I would have been more popular, boys would have liked me earlier, that kind of thing. I don't know how much of that was a function of me in that environment and how much of a function my experience was of me in any environment. I think some of those factors were personal factors, just personality. And it's hard for me to draw lines about how much of that was shaped. There are a lot of pieces, but at the time when I was a teenager applying for colleges, there were like 3 pieces, and I was pretty sure that I was controlling for all of them by going to school on the East Coast.
Okay.
My school, like a lot of small liberal arts schools on the East Coast, was not particularly diverse. They were working on it, but there was something like 90 to 95% white, I think. I did feel really poor when I went there because I was, mostly on scholarship, and the school that I went to was a school where a lot of wealthy people sent their children, and it was a lot of, legacy students. But I did feel like I could pass easier. I didn't think about my skin color for years. I didn't really think about it for 4 years when I was there. And so in a sense, I did get a relief from that. Like I disengaged something that had been constantly called to my attention growing up. Mm-hmm. And so in that way I did. But, it wasn't as simple as I thought it was when I was 17, Even if you take skin color out of it, there's still money issues, there's still other life issues, social issues, but I no longer had to feel uncomfortable about being white. And then I had a lot of I'm going to bring them out, but they were really what I now associate shame with. Thoughts like, yes, I'm a white American, haha, this is what it's supposed to be like. This is like my birthright that I'm claiming. And it's embarrassing for me to say that, but I also am recalling like the sigh of relief I could kind of take with it. Yeah. And I remember my dad commenting on it. He's also white, my biological father, and shortly after I left Hawaii, he also left Hawaii and moved to New York City. And I remember him coming up and visiting me, and he was like, hey, Rachie, isn't it really nice to be with all of these white people? And I said, yeah, it is. And I didn't feel ashamed at the time because I was pissed at having felt uncomfortable for so long. And I was just like, yeah, I deserve this ease. I'm trying to find a little bit of a cultural home, maybe. Yeah, and I was just like, maybe my people are the bookish white ones on the East Coast. Like, maybe those are my people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Try to find a place where you belong.
Yeah, and that's where the compassion piece comes in. Because, on the one hand, I'm like, wow, kind of racist, kind of, shirking maybe not wanting to engage with a lot of the difficulty in the gray areas. But then the other part of me is like, well, I'm a kid and a teenager trying to feel like I have a cultural home. That's not so terrible. I really did not want to be white. I really wanted to have black hair and dark skin. I wanted to be short. I didn't want to be so skinny. I wanted to look like the other people in my life. And so I think that some of the shame is just like holdover negative feelings and pain from that.
Because in Hawaii, you really didn't fit in.
No, I didn't. My sister scanned a picture on Facebook, and it was us in our hula halau. And she is not my biological sister, but she's much shorter, and she's a little darker, and she has brown hair. And my hair is darker now, but it was like real blonde when I was young. And so I'm about a head taller and way paler than everybody else in my halau. And so you see like girl me. And I'm just this like kind of white blob, white skinny blob on the corner. Yeah, so I didn't totally fit in. And we weren't from there, and so that actually added a layer, because you could be white and from Hawaii if you were born there and if your parents had lived there for a long time, and that was different as well.
So you couldn't even fit into that sector?
Yeah, because my parents were new, and they were, mainland, and they had mainland culture, and haole is the term, derogatory mostly, but somewhat descriptive for white people. In my first week of school, I didn't want to play with, I didn't really like playground games. I was a little bookish. And somebody called me a stupid haole because I didn't want to play with them. And I was like, right. And then, we learned pretty quick. People called us haoles. School, our elementary school was spelled H-O, Okina, which looks like an apostrophe O, K-E-N-A. And so my parents pronounced it Hukina, but it's Ho'okena. And so we didn't know how to pronounce like the names of the streets. Like our neighborhood was K-A-O-H-E Ranch. And we pronounced it Kahoe, but it's Kaohe. And the highway that goes around the island is Kamehameha, but my parents were like Kamehameha. And then there's the City of Refuge where we took our field trips. It's Pu'uhonua Ohonau now, but you can imagine with all of the Okinas and the vowels and the way you pronounce it, they'd just be like, the City of Refuge. And so we didn't pronounce things right. There was a lot of food culture that we didn't do, like poi. I didn't actually like white rice, and there's a lot of like spam musubi and sushi consumption, and I definitely didn't like spam. I was a really picky eater, and lihimoi I didn't like at all, and mango pickle, which is pickled mango, green mango pickled in vinegar, and so like, the apex of culinary deliciousness was like pork lau lau, and we didn't eat pork. And so we would go to functions and we'd be like, we don't eat pork. All right, and it was just like a completely lacked couth in those situations. I was like, I would eat like boxed macaroni and cheese, and it was just like, do you want like sushi, spam musubi, a loco moco, or like lau lau? And I was like, I don't want any of those. And so just the way we ate was really different. The way we ate, the way we looked, the way we sounded. We lucked out, and we actually got to join a hula halau or a hula group. But it wasn't the like commercial lipstick, muumuu grass skirt kind of thing. It was for real. Like Lydia Mahi, our kumuhula, was serious. Like we were the only white girls in there, and we had like kind of informal initiation. Like we were kind of hazed a little bit, like not formally but informally. And I did that from probably like 4th grade until 9th grade, and it was awesome. Like she would only teach us in Hawaiian, and she would, she wouldn't cut us any slack for being culturally ignorant. We would just have to do it, and if we didn't do it, we were dressed down, and that's how we learned. It was a very experiential, high context, like, all right, you're going to do this. You're going to go out and you're going to find these snails that are only found on this beach, and you're going to harvest them, and you're going to clean them out, and you're going to make leis with them for this performance that we're having on this beach, and you're going to sew your own stuff, and you're going to learn about the deity and the king and the queen to whom these songs are in honor, and you're going to translate them, and you're going to pray in Hawaiian, and it was really cool. And so I think that Lydia, Kumu Lydia, and the other members and the moms and the families in the halau were the best sort of education I could have asked for. We kind of did it. Like, I actually was able to earn respect. I was a terrible dancer. I was a worse dancer. But I had an amazing ability to chant. And so, like, I earned respect that way. And my sister was a good dancer. And our mom was, she could use a sewing machine, and she was good at making leis. And so, like, we became skilled enough to gain acceptance, I think. Once we earned respect, there was a little bit more social mobility or flexibility. But like, I had one of the halau moms after practice, run her hands through my long blonde ponytail, and she's like, the last time I touched a ponytail this color, I was dragging it through the dirt. It's so funny. And she didn't say it in a hostile way, but I kind of was just like, you were touching my head. And I didn't feel unsafe because that was just kind of a thing. Like, I was used to that, but I became used to that. And so I think that some of the shame from being white came from internalizing that as, like, business as usual, that's what being white means. It's like a bad thing.
Yeah.
Although I would argue that my experiences are nowhere near as, like, omnipresent and oppressive as not white people's. I got a tiny, just flavor shade taste of what it feels like to be so frickin' aware of and uncomfortable in your skin that, like, I have kind of a place that I can go to get that visceral, at least an idea of the visceral impact of that. And so it's like a personal, emotional experience with something a little bit like what oppression might feel like. But I can also see, now that I've learned more, and I'm still learning about the history of oppression in Hawaii, but I can see how, like, destructive it is, and how the kind of ugliness and hate that it can breed in people, and the kind of powerlessness that informs cruelty. I think that if you oppress and disempower anybody, the option for, like, interpersonal cruelty probably increases, and that not everybody can get away from it. And what if you can't get away from it? What does that do to you? How might that embitter you? How might that stress you? How might that change how you experience the world and other people and relationships? It took a little bit of a retreat to kind of heal up, to kind of make those places less raw, because I don't think that me in pain is my best self. And so I had to get a little bit of distance from that first. And then it was the engagement with the pain that I felt and applying it to my education about the experiences of other people of color in the United States. And realizing that white was, I don't know, it's hard to articulate. I guess seeing the way the behavior of white people was directly connected to all of the completely horrendous racism in the continental US, and then realizing that it was a different situation with a slightly different development, but that the seeds of that kind of hatred, that interpersonal hatred and pain, was a really fresh reaction to something that hadn't happened all that long ago. Whatever hatred or interpersonal disrespect or violence I felt had to be connected, because the only way I think that people are fundamentally wounded or hateful or angry as if something has been taken from them, or if they're wounded. Like if they are hurt or oppressed, and realizing that they were both hurt and oppressed and that their country and their sovereignty were taken from them, I was just kind of like, oh. And I was able to remember my student perspective from the Halau and sort of like apply it, I guess. Just like I'd spent so much of my life sort of being forced into the student perspective that now I could don it again with a little more interpersonal and ego strength, because I had retreated to heal. And wanting to do that because I really didn't want to be the kind of person who enforced the pain that I experienced on anyone. I didn't want to do what had been done. And I understood what had been done because kind of what white people did to begin with. I think it taught me a lot of compassion, and it taught me, I think it really kind of inoculated me against long-term thinking that like white privilege was really awesome and unassailable. Like I don't think at this point I'd ever be capable of just taking refuge in my whiteness again.